Hey friends, welcome to Jurassic Pod, a podcast 165 million years in the making. We have a special episode for you today. It's a conversation with Hannah McGregor. She just wrote the book Clever Girl, which dives into the queer feminist themes of Jurassic Park. Hannah is an academic, podcaster, writer, and just a great conversationalist, and of course, a diehard Jurassic fan. So we get into so many themes about feminism in the original film, environmentalism, capitalism, all the good stuff that make the original so easy to look back and to digest and really uncover more and more meaning. And it's amazing how after so many years, we can still have new frames and new ways to look at this movie and apply it to our lives today. Remember, you can listen to this episode wherever your podcast at Jurassic Pod. Remember to subscribe and do all the things if you want more Jurassic news as the new film comes out, Jurassic Park Rebirth. All right, on to the conversation with Hannah. I devoured this book, and I'm so glad I got a hard copy, and there's notes and everything. It's just, there's so much we could talk about. But first, I want to just throw a fun question. Besides Dr. Ian Malcolm, who's your favorite character in Jurassic Park?
Oh, the big mean velociraptor, for sure. The mean one, like the one
the mean one.
Yeah. The leader, like the main velociraptor who's killed all of the others except for two and then trained them how to hunt as a pack. Yeah. An icon.
And a character, right? That's the best thing about this series is the dinosaurs are characters. They become even more characterized and humanized as it goes on, probably to a fault. But
I would argue to a fault.
Once we get them crying,
giving them names and inexplicable fondness for Chris Pratt, and you've really lost me. But
it gets really kinky at some points, and I'm like, what? I don't know what we're trying to do here with the Raptors, but Chris Pratt, there's a lot of attention.
I mean, I've got a theory about what I think we're trying to do.
We'll get into it. Okay. I want to talk about your childhood and experience with this movie. Anytime we have a guest or have a conversation, we always go back to your first experience because I think it dictates a lot your relationship with this franchise. So can you share your first experience watching this film as a kid? I'm assuming a kid.
Absolutely. Yes, as a kid. I was 8 when this movie came out. And it was one of the first movies that I saw in theaters. Certainly one of the first ones that I have a strong memory of. And I really particularly viscerally remember it as my first sort of collective theater going experience, because I can still remember the feeling in the theater when those T-Rex footsteps vibrate for the first time and the way that it rippled through the room of people. And it then became one of the very few VHSs that my family owned, because in the early 90s, VHSs were extremely expensive, so you didn't own a lot of them. And the ones that you could get generally were through some sort of deal, like in this case, I think a Burger King family deal.
Oh, okay, yeah, there we go.
That's 4 meals, you would get a free VHS. And that's how we acquired our household copy of Jurassic Park. And then I just watched it over and over and over again. I just adored it.
And it's so funny when we grow up, and this, for kids listening, when you have physical media, especially when it was expensive, I mean, it was, well, this is what I'm going to watch. And you have to fall in love with something because this is the copy you have in your house. There's no unlimited access. It's just there. Yeah. But it creates those special bonds with movies. I think a lot of us that grew up with physical media, which is a crazy thing to say. It's a weird thing to say, but it makes a huge difference what you have in the house. That's what you're watching. Yeah. And for you, that was Jurassic Park. Why do you think
it was Jurassic Park and Wayne World? Which is
you know what?
My personality in a nutshell.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good combo, I do have to say. That's a good double feature, actually. I would be if I was at a drive-in, that'd be a great double feature.
I rewatched Wayne's World recently, and I gotta say, with a couple of notable exceptions, it's aged well.
Which
that movie's still funny.
For an 80s comedy, that's impressive to age well.
Yeah.
Why do you think Jurassic Park, this film that you had a connection with as a kid, is so ripe for finding deeper meaning? That, so many years later, we're sitting on a podcast talking about it. You wrote a book on it. Why is this film able to do that?
I've got a couple of theories that mostly have to do with the way that popular culture circulates. Um, so blockbuster movies, of which Jurassic Park is one of the sort of iconic early examples, one of their main characteristics is that they have very, very simple plots.
Hmm.
It's kind of where the Marvel movies are really starting to mess up, actually, is that they forgot the part where the plots are actually supposed to be very, very simple, and almost parable like, so that it can appeal to a wide range of audiences, so that people across political demographics can identify with it. And then what happens when those very simple stories circulate very widely is that they become a touchstone through which we collectively work through or come to understand other things about the world. And so, I think that there are particularly things about dinosaurs, which we can talk about more, that make this a recurring touch point, like our sort of fascination with dinosaurs. But I also think that so much of the role it continues to play is the fact that it's like, for so many of us, the first time we encountered the sublime, the first time we sort of came face to face with a story about something like much bigger than the human. And that then becomes a recurring touch point that we use to, like, as we grow, continue to develop our relationship to like what it means to be human, and um what our place in the larger history of the earth is.
Hmm. It's much deeper and a bigger meaning. I think that's why this film stands the test of time, right? Is there's so much to unpack, and that is just below the surface of a very marketable dinosaur movie, which Spielberg talked about. Kind of, he wanted to go back to the era when he was a kid watching these 1950s movies with the stop motion dinosaurs, Godzilla, and he kind of wanted to bring that back. So it's very simple at a storytelling standpoint, at a marketability, but just below the surface, there's so much to unpack.
See, I would argue that rather than there being a lot under the surface, there is a huge amount that we bring to it as viewers.
Yes.
That the text itself is, interesting enough to support repeated viewings for sure. But that at the end of the day, what makes a work stand up over time and endure for people is the way that we bring so much of ourselves into it. Like there's stuff under the surface there, but like not a ton. Like not a ton, like compare it to like a Dostoevsky novel. Like
Right.
it's significantly simpler and much, much easier to kind of figure out everything that's going on. Right? There's forms of art that are profoundly layered. And then there's forms of art that are almost like mirrors that we see ourselves in. And a lot of the complexity that we're bringing into them is the complexity that's actually ours, the complexity of sort of the questions that we are asking as viewers.
Speaking of mirrors, you brought a lot of yourself to this book. And when I jumped into it, I was like, okay, this is going to be great. This is going to be a thought exercise. This is going to be the stuff I loved. But you really shared a lot about your childhood and growing up and bringing yourself to this movie. Can you share about why you chose to do that? Because I think it took a lot of bravery to reveal that much in association with a movie. And this book is just as much about you than the movie that we love, Jurassic Park. So what really prompted you to dive deep into that?
Yeah. For me, it is again about that idea that so much of popular culture is what we are bringing into it, and the really complex ways it often sort of interweaves with our lives. So I often think about the culture that we love as being kind of like a toolkit that we amass through our lives. So, like, what are the things that you go back to time and time again? And what do they give you? And so I wanted to think about Jurassic Park not as sort of this object of study, often, in a theoretical void, but as like a thing that has deeply woven through my life and has deeply woven through a lot of people's lives. And I think by really emphasizing that specificity, like here's what this text has meant to me, here's how I'm thinking about it. I also, hope it is an invitation to other people to also be like, oh, here's some of the things it's meant to me. And maybe add a new layer onto, how people are encountering Jurassic Park. But I think like for so many of us, it's nostalgia is a big part of why we love it. Like, it brings us back to this experience of childlike wonder. And to get at that, I really wanted to sort of, I guess, have like a protagonist in the book. Just that protagonist is me.
Yeah. But it helped me just even thinking about these ideas and concepts. And obviously, when I think about Jurassic Park, when I think about feminism as in its relation to the movie, of course, the scene that really stands out, if someone would ask me, like, what are the feministic parts of Jurassic Park? I'm like, oh, of course, Laura Dern, and specifically the line where Hammond's like, I should be the one to go to work on the electrical, and she's like, we can debate about the roles
and survival
situations later. Like, she's like, I gotta get this shit done. I gotta figure like save our asses. Yep. That's the one I point to. But so many parts of this movie that I did maybe subconsciously realize, but didn't realize, specifically the one that stood out is when Grant takes the two female ends of the seatbelt and how that is symbolic of the dinosaurs. I never realized that. To me, I always read it as a characterization of Grant being savvy. And I felt really dumb reading this because it was the first time I was like, oh, duh, Luke. Obviously.
I'm delighted I get to be the first person who pointed that out to you. It is definitely not a thing I noticed on my own. It's a thing I've, seen pointed out online. And that I think was a sort of a intentional wink from Spielberg.
Right.
And it does a few different things. It reminds us that one of the characteristics of Dr. Alan Grant is that he is bad with technology, and that even the most simple forms of technology turn on him, like a seatbelt. It is an example of how savvy he is and how good he is at solving problems in unexpected situations, in particular because he's not reliant on technology, right? Like he's the digger. He's not a tech guy, which is part of why he's able to like survive and help the kids navigate this world. But it is also very literally the two female ends of the seatbelt. Right? There's a buckle in the tongue and a seatbelt, and those are referred to as the male and female ends in a incredibly kind of gross analogy. Sort of like, the
automotive industry, they're
men
not
are pointy bits and women are holes. That's all. That's it. But anyway, that he is taking two female ends of the seatbelt and knotting them together, which is, a reference to the fact that female dinosaurs will find a way to reproduce. And also, I think, like a really good euphemism for lesbian sex.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and it's there's so many other ones that popped up in the book. That's why I say we always say we're lovers, not experts, because like we love these movies, but we're definitely not experts. Obviously, missed some things. Can you share some other moments that stand out that I think people would be interested, specifically in a queer subtext in this film that you shared in the book?
God, do I remember any of them? Really great question. One of the ones that I come back to again and again, which is, I think for me, when I think about the feminism in the book, I'm like, it's this moment. It's when Ian Malcolm is, philosophizing. He says, God creates dinosaurs, God destroys dinosaurs, God creates man, man destroys God, man creates dinosaurs. I think he ends there. I think he says man creates dinosaurs. And then Dr. Sattler says dinosaurs eat man, woman inherits the earth.
Yes.
Which is like just very funny. Like just a very funny line. And it like is delivered without looking at, like, she's in between these two men and she doesn't even look at them. She just like
she's like these
just
guys.
Like focusing on her dinosaur business. But it also reminds us that like the dinosaurs eat man part is gonna happen. Like it hasn't happened yet at that point. I guess one guy got eaten at the beginning, but like these dinosaurs are going to eat notably exclusively men. And so that then invites us to be like, oh, is the next part also going to happen? And
Right.
if the dinosaurs are all women, is the inheriting of the earth by women going to be women dinosaurs? Are
Yeah.
they the ones who are inheriting the
Yeah.
earth? But it sets us up for this kind of like something is happening here, something that is chaotic and subversive, and that thing is going to put women into a position of power.
Mm, yeah. I know a couple other ones that I noticed you brought up is the role reversals of, especially when we think about the 90s action adventure
Mm,
blockbuster movie. This
yeah.
this movie is like progressive now with the role reversals, but it feels very authentic. I never thought about Dr. Ian Malcolm being this like sex symbol damsel in distress almost, because
Yeah.
he's reclined half the movie with his
He
shirt
is
off.
reclined with his shirt open throughout almost the entire movie. And the closest we have to an action star, I mean, I would say our real action star is Dr. Sattler, right? She's the one
Yeah.
who like does like impressive actiony things. But obviously Dr. Grant is also one of our main protagonists who is out there avoiding dying in the
Yeah.
mouths of dinosaurs. Um, but really critically, like he's not shooting guns, he's not off there being manly, he's being a scientist, a huge nerd, right? Like it's such a an endearing through line that like he knows that they're in danger and he's trying to survive, and also he's still like, God, dinosaurs are so cool.
Oh.
And like quizzing Timmy about the dinosaurs as they come
Right.
along. Like so adorable. But his main role is to care for these children.
Mm,
And so we've got a male protagonist who is positioned primarily as a nurturer and whose narrative arc is from somebody who does not recognize his duty of care to children to somebody who does. Right?
right.
The first time we encounter him, he is bullying a child with a velociraptor claw. The last time we see him, he's holding two children who are sleeping on him because they feel so safe with him. And that is his like that is his development as a character. And to have, you know, a blockbuster action movie where our male protagonist's emotional arc is learning to be gentle and tender with children
Mm.
is like, I think, pretty radical.
Yeah, still unheard of, really.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's
And
crazy.
it's you know, it's a total reversal of what we get in Jurassic World, right? Where Chris Pratt is a, you know, capital A action star. He's shooting guns. He's being an alpha. There's not a moment of tenderness except kind of towards the
Oh,
velociraptors. That's
there's
about
some
as tender as he
tenderness.
gets.
There's a lot of tenderness with Bluey or whatever. Blue, not Bluey. Bluey's
Yeah.
that TV show, but the kids' TV show. Blue.
Wait, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's different. It's getting really kinky. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I think that's why this movie is still so fresh today. I mean, unfortunately, right? I think that's kind of the unfortunate thing, but why it still resonates today, because you have, and also the actors I think playing the roles too were perfectly cast. It was like this.
Fabulous
I
cast.
call them the Holy Trinity, because it's really hard to capture that lightning in a bottle where they were all prevalent actors, but not necessarily like Dwayne the Rock Johnson that's selling this movie, and it made it special and really
Yeah.
cemented the characters in a
Yeah.
real way.
I mean, it's also, you know, you say fresh, but I actually think at this point it's notably dated because it's not what movies are like anymore.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
you know, it's just like I wish that movies had continued to trend in that direction. But one of the things that's distinct about 90s blockbusters is that you could have people in them who looked like kind of normal,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or
Yeah,
like
yeah,
at least interesting. Like it's the same thing if you go back and watch like teen movies from the era. It's like the teenagers kind of look like teenagers
right,
and like they kind of look like people, but like now everybody needs to look like an airbrushed AI generated meta human.
right.
Like you don't see people on screens who look like humans
Humans,
anymore.
yeah.
They all look like they're like sort of um animatronic.
Yeah, they're like washed out almost. Like they're not. There's like a layer, like a filter over them.
there's a filter, their faces have been face tuned within an inch of their lives. There's like a shiny veneer of CG over everybody's faces. Their bodies are all sort of profoundly artificial, whether
Right.
that's done by computer animation or through completely wild and deeply harmful exercise routines. Everybody
Yeah.
having to like turn their bodies into these like weird sculptures in order to be in Marvel movies. And it's just like, I don't know, Alan Grant, like Sam Neill's a smoke show,
Yeah.
no denying it. But like Alan Grant is not a 2020s movie star.
No.
Um,
No.
and when you see, when the Golden Trio comes back in Jurassic World Dominion, and you have them against, Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, it's like they look like they're from different universes.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Yeah.
It's
And it's like they're scientists. It's so nice that they were scientists.
it is. Yeah, all three. I mean, that's the thing, and they have these scientists come in when your heroes are scientists coming in against this huge organization, this almost Disney like dangerous Disney like world. It's such an interesting contrast, and that's I have a InGen mug, and I have it ironically because I do love a good fictional corporation, especially
Yeah,
with a slogan
100%.
like "We make your future." The idealism of an organization like that I just love it. And it's one of the reasons I love this movie. You talk about in the book a lot about science and capitalism, how they're related. You say scientific discovery is intertwined with capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you. Do you think Spielberg and the writer David Koepp let the Hammond character in the movie off the hook a little bit? Because
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes I'm like, he is truly horrible. We have that scene with Dr. Sadler and him, and she's like laying on the table, like, dude, get over
People
it.
are dying. She screams at him. And then we're like, but what a nice grandpa. Like, no, this guy's a full villain. And I do think it's interesting to look back at a story that takes a venture capitalist tech CEO who harmed people profoundly in his pursuit of profit and his narrow vision of what he was developing, and to make that character sympathetic and likable.
Mm-hmm.
Because, now our world is run by a handful of John Hammonds,
Yes.
um, who have, probably the same political allegiances that John Hammond did, and the same absolutely brutal disregard for human life, and the same belief that discovery for discovery's sake is an inherent good. And I guess what I'm saying is that we should have seen John Hammond die brutally on screen.
Yeah, we should. It is one of the things about the movie that I do think I don't disagree with the choice, because in the book he is painted as the evil guy and he gets a really solid death.
Yeah.
But I think you talked about how he's portrayed in this movie, but you do it in a really interesting way. One of the things that I was really surprised about and never thought about is you said Hammond is trying to unwild the dinosaurs to make them knowable and manageable. Because there's the idea of rewilding, and to me,
Mm-hmm.
it's even a darker character because he's trying to be this Attenborough. I mean, it's the actor's last name was Attenborough, but the BBC Attenborough guy. He's trying to be kind of have that part of showmanship, and then in the second movie, he does turn into naturalist. But
Yeah.
can you share a little bit more about that of like the unwild of the dinosaurs?
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things that's really key about what Hammond is trying to do is that while on the surface he's giving Jurassic Park a thin veneer of ecological recovery, what he's actually doing is creating an exhibit.
Hmm.
And he initially he uses a number of defenses to try to frame his work as ethical. Part of it is definitely the like, uh, isn't it cool that we figured out how to do this? Like that's sort
Hmm.
of his first one. And he
Yes.
really thinks his scientist visitors are going to be on board with this, like, isn't it cool that we figured this out? And they're like, no, sorry. Like, you probably don't know this, but when you do a PhD, you do have to learn about ethics in research. Like, we did all have to sort of study ethics. So we actually are thinking a little bit about the implications of our soupçon. And then he pivots to this sort of, well, you wouldn't be mad at me if I was bringing back, this extinct species of bird.
Yeah.
So he tries to move very quickly.
Condors. Yeah, I love that one.
Good, excellent, Hammond. So he pivots very quickly to this new tactic, right? Actually, I'm doing ecological restoration. I'm bringing back a species that went extinct. But it's really key that he is in no way seeking to introduce animals into an ecosystem, particularly because when you are doing ecological restoration, you need to understand the place a species has within its ecosystem, the harm that's been caused by the species being removed from the ecosystem, and you have to ask, can it be reintroduced in a way that will restore what was there previously instead of just proving to be another huge disruption? And so this question of can we actually restore ecosystems at all is a very complex one.
Yeah.
In BC right now, there are areas where grizzly bears used to be a keystone species, which is, a term in ecology for a species that has a major pivotal role within the entire structure of the ecosystem, flora and fauna. And grizzlies were hunted to extinction in that area. And they are starting to reintroduce them. But it's so slow and careful and managed. It's so thoughtfully being done by people who are really studying how they can bring this species back in a way that doesn't cause more harm. And what he's done, he said, we're restoring dinosaurs. He's taking different species that lived millions of years apart. He's putting them onto an island that had a pre-existing ecosystem that he is fundamentally disrupting, irreparably disrupting, right? The movie doesn't engage with
They don't talk about that. That's a whole other thing.
What lived on the island already? There were animals there.
Yes.
How are they doing? And at one point, Dr. Sattler points out, you've got these plants that you're, putting in a vase because you think that they're pretty, but they're poisonous. The implication with the sick triceratops is that a plant has been introduced into their ecosystem that they wouldn't have encountered normally, and that perhaps is making them sick. Or that something's making them sick and we don't know because we have no idea how they're interacting with these plants that they are hundreds of millions of years of evolution divided from.
Which the guy, I don't know if it's the doctor or the park worker there is when Dr. Sadler breaks it down, he's like, oh yeah, no shit. He is totally oblivious. Incredible.
He's the park worker is also a doctor. He's
he's a doctor.
Animal vet that they have brought in to help take care of the dinosaurs. And he's just like,
good point.
Well, albeit. I mean, rewatching this movie most recently, I was like, sorry, she's a paleobotanist.
Yes.
Why does she know to check the dilation of the pupils on a dinosaur? I don't know.
It was a tough sell to get those people to Costa Rica. They were scraping the bottom of the barrel, I think.
Yeah. So ultimately what he's doing is creating an exhibit of living things and living things that he thinks that he has total control over.
Yeah.
Both through the sort of technologies of capture and containment that they have developed, right? The fences. But also through ways in which they have altered them at a biological level. Trying to control their sex, trying to, build in the lysine contingency, which is building in an intentional flaw so that you can kill them more easily. This is not the restoration of wild animals. This is an attempt to biologically engineer an attraction.
It's so true. And I think about when you talk about grizzlies, because I don't know if the character in the movie talks about it, but the lawyer talks about the money aspect. If grizzly bears were equated to a huge profit and could be created at the next Disney World, you'd probably be done differently here in the U.S. if you want to think about it differently. And it kind of is. I mean, there's a whole nother thing with big game animals and hunting, and especially different parts of Africa. But this is like it at scale. This is like bringing, like you said earlier, it's like bringing that Silicon Valley mindset to ecology, and it's displayed in all of its terrible glory.
Yeah. It is about profit. It is about extraction from the natural world with no regard for the harm that you're causing. It's about viewing everything around you as something that is yours to use, and justifying it to yourself because you are the person who came up with the idea.
Yeah.
And if you're smart and rich, that must mean, or rather, if you're rich, that must mean that you are smart and good.
You should, and you can, because the economy, the logic is the economy rewards you, and the economy is rewarding you that you're intelligent, so you believe your own myth, and then you get power.
We desperately wish we lived in a meritocracy, and John Hammond is proof we don't.
Yes, I want to. Speaking of this aspect, I really like when you talk about the lawyer characters coming in, talking to Hammond, and quoting from your book. Then the investors will be satisfied, which is honestly as much a fantasy as bringing dinosaurs to life. Imagine a world where large corporations respect the word of someone with a PhD. I just think that's one of my favorite parts of the book. That it's like, wow,
nobody cares.
That's really the biggest leap of the movie. It's not dinosaurs.
You think a letter from a working paleontologist is going to convince the insurance companies? I don't think so, dude.
No, it's not going to happen. I want to talk about
cute.
It is so cute. I want to talk about another aspect that you shared in the book that I think was really fascinating. It's a bit of a turn back to this like aspect of the dinosaurs as monster, talking about your childhood. Can you share a little bit about radical negativity and why it's common amongst minoritized communities, and in your relation to that with Jurassic Park?
Yeah, absolutely. So radical negativity is the idea that a lot of people who don't see themselves reflected in mainstream culture will instead deliberately embrace negative or rejected characteristics, often via strong identification with villain characters. So it's, in general, it's a deliberate embrace of something that your culture has rejected. So for example, the way that disabled people might deliberately embrace the idea. There's on TikTok, there's a subculture known as bed rot TikTok, which is like disabled and chronically ill folks just like lying in bed all day and like taking this idea of like you're rotting away in your bed, you're being lazy, you're not contributing, and instead embracing it and sort of taking it on as a characteristic. And one of the forms that has taken is a lot of minoritized audiences not seeing ourselves in mainstream culture as the heroes, but seeing ourselves in the often racialized, often queer-coded, often disabled, profoundly othered villain characters, and being like, cool, well, the person who I'm most like is this villain, so I'm just going to embrace this villain. We see it in a lot of the fandoms that circulate around Disney villains, for example, how Ursula the Sea Witch has become a queer icon. But there's lots and lots of examples of it. And it's a kind of resistant reading, like a reading against the grain of the text. The text is saying these are bad, and you're saying, actually, but what if good? But what if good, actually? And I don't quite think Jurassic Park is saying the dinosaurs are bad. But they're certainly not, I think the characters that you're meant to identify with
are scared of them. Yeah, they're terrified.
Yeah. I mean, they love them. Everybody in this movie loves these dinosaurs. It's part of the central conceit of like the characters are awed by them, blown away by them. They weep when they encounter dinosaurs up close for the first time. It's not horror or disgust. But it is fear for sure, and a kind of increasing monstrosity through the movies, particularly once we introduce the velociraptors, who are, I think, the most monstrous characters in the movie, because unlike the other dinosaurs, They appear to be hunting children for sport.
Yes. They're definitely playing with their food, you could
For
say.
sure. And just no way they're still hungry.
No.
Like by
no.
that kitchen scene, like they've eaten so many dudes.
They're good.
It's like
I think they're probably good.
they'd be asleep. Like reptiles eat a big meal and then just go sleep somewhere. Like anyway.
As my blanket term for any time we question the science of the dinosaurs, it's the DNA. It's in the DNA. It's the DNA's flawed. It's the DNA's fault. That's my go-to.
They accidentally put some light murder in the DNA.
Yes. It's like the Force in Star Wars. You could just like explain everything away with the Force. It just kind of covers it all.
Yeah. It's magic.
It is. I think it's a really cool concept. Do you think it's changing? Because it seems like there's a lot of power in the ownership of that. And you talked about like you growing up, like identifying with the dinosaurs and how it helped you connect with this, not only the movie, but helped you along your life. Do you think it's changing now in our culture where we're seeing, Disney is creating a villain's world, where we're seeing anti-hero stories in film? Do you think it's changing in a way?
I do. And I think, there's been really significant conversations, particularly about the importance of representation in children's media, about the idea that like growing up as a child and never seeing yourself in media can be a like really harmful and alienating experience for kids. And so we get a sort of intentional diversification of who we're seeing in children's media, who gets to be the protagonist. I mean, our generation, my generation, I don't know how old you are. You look like 21.
I'm a millennial, so
okay.
all
right. So yeah, millennials like all like run all of the animation studios now. We are the ones who are making culture now. And one of, for me, the most interesting through lines of like recent Disney movies has been a profound reconsideration of the villains. Taking the people who would be villains and instead saying like, okay, but what if there's something more complicated happening here? So we get Elsa in Frozen, who's like, she was originally supposed to be the villain.
Yeah. Set up to be the villain.
And then they set up to be the villain. Or we get like the monster in Moana, who is in fact not a monster and who in fact needs to be responded to with love rather than violence. And so many of these moments are about shifting the kinds of stories we tell about those who are other and those who are different, and instead saying like, what is there to be learned from and embraced in encounters with profound difference? But also at a very simple level, like, let's let brown kids see themselves in movies.
Right, right. It can be very simple. It's not that complicated. Yeah.
And a part of that is the diversification of the industries too. Just like more people of color, more queer people, more trans people actually working in media production. Still, massively outnumbered by straight white men. But representation comes not only from the diversification of the stories, but from the diversification of the actual people who get to tell stories in the first place.
Right. The actual industry. And yeah, you think about even Jurassic Park. I mean, it's 3 straight white men that are kind of responsible. It's David Koepp, Spielberg, and Crichton who wrote the book.
Oh yeah. It's an extremely white movie. And like the people of color we see on screen are nameless background workers, like kind of pseudo villains, or Samuel L. Jackson, who is unceremoniously devoured.
Yes, and overworked. Definitely overworked.
I mean, before that, an icon. The insistence. I laughed so hard the last time I watched this when he's disgusted by Dennis Nedry's workspace.
Yeah,
he's like throwing all the garbage off it, and I was like, dude, you have been chain smoking inside this office this entire time. You know who's making this workplace disgusting? Imagine what that office smells like.
It's rough because they're working long hours and they're working long hours
and they are chain smoking. It just smells like stale cigarette smoking BO in there.
Yeah, it's not a happy place to be.
Not good.
It's not good. All right, we have to talk about Dr. Ian Malcolm. You talk about in the book how you relate to him as an academic that's not afraid to speak your mind.
And ruin lunches.
In
Yeah.
ruin lunches,
Yeah.
of course. We think about the my favorite scene in the movie is kind of I don't know if they had a lunch, but it's the projector scene where we get a lot
Yeah,
of the
there's a lunch
contrarian.
there that they never successfully eat. Alejandro has prepared a delicious sea bass.
That's right.
I remember this detail because Lindy West has an excellent essay about Jurassic Park in her collection Shit Actually. And she really picks out that detail about how bad she feels for Alejandro, that he worked so hard on that sea bass. Nobody's touching it.
And it's a I mean, we know it is a really high quality kitchen. I mean, that is a kitchen.
They
serve.
spared no
They
expense.
spare no expense, and they're not eating the beautiful.
They're
sea
not
bass.
eating Alejandro's beautiful sea bass.
It's so sad. But
Yeah.
what makes Dr. Ian Malcolm so special? Like, what do you think the character? Because on the page that character was different, in the book it's different. So why do you think the way it is in the movie it makes it so special? This is this is a leading question, but
Yeah. I mean, is it? I mean, part of it is just Jeff Goldblum's raw charisma. Like,
yeah.
it's just, he's so good. And you can see how the role played by somebody else could have been unbearable, frankly.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of his behavior is like quite off-putting. And it's like, well, you're just extremely charismatic. And everything you do is extremely charming and very funny. Like, he's a
Yes.
very funny actor. But I think that there is also a role he plays in the movie as the audience surrogate. Like, he's the closest we have to an audience surrogate of somebody who's like standing a little bit outside of the action and observing it and commenting on it, and often wisecracking, but often just being the person who's like, guys, this seems like a really bad idea. Right? And so many action movies, horror movies so often have this figure, and that figure
Prophet
is
of
somebody.
Doom. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But that for me added on is that layer of like the kind of scholar that he is, which is that like he sort of steps back and theorizes things at the levels of systems.
Yeah.
That he's saying like, here's how unpredictable large complex systems are, which is what chaos theory actually is, right? It's not actually chaos, it's just the profound difficulty of predicting outcomes in increasingly complex systems. And spending time with complexity is, I mean, very important, and I think kind of a skill we collectively don't have in our culture, is like engaging with complexity and understanding the interlocking nature of profoundly complex systems. And it's something that I'm very drawn to, and that I love having a figure there who represents the importance of taking that step back and being like, hey, absolutely not. And I love the sort of physicality of Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler as scientists, the way they literally get in the shit, the way they're like dirty and material and engaged with the world around them. Like, I think that's beautiful and I really respect it. And it's also just not it's not who I am as a scholar. I always say this, I'm like, other people can do the archival research. I'm too lazy to do rigorous archival research, but I love to like take a step back and find unexpected connections between things.
That's such a profound way to describe. That sounds like what you do, but also what Malcolm does. Even his posture. I think about when you talk about the other two, get in there, get dirty. Where Malcolm, especially in that scene, he's leaning back and he's like observing, and he's at one point. Grant Sadler leave the car, and he's just, and then I'm talking to myself, and then that's chaos theory. Like, but he really is observing and seeing the bigger picture, and that's where he can also be funny, but deliver the gravitas of some of my favorite lines, like the rape of the natural world. That that it's such a quiet part of the movie before it gets really loud, but it's so quiet and profound and prophetic of what's about to happen.
His insistence that discovery for discovery's sake cannot be celebrated, I think, is a lesson that like people still desperately need to hear.
Yes.
The other interesting piece of this has just occurred to me. like Ian Malcolm as systems thinker comes up again when he and John Hammond are um arguing about how to direct Dr. Sattler through the power installation to get the power back
Mm,
on. Um, and Hammond is like fixated on small details,
right.
right? He's like, okay, you're gonna now you turn left. Oh no, wait, no, okay, go back. No, you were supposed to have turned right, right? He's like reading the schematic like one tiny square at a time. And Dr. Malcolm takes a step back and is like, here is the you know pipe above you that is gonna go right where you need to go. Follow that. And it's a function of that understanding of systems and that ability to think a little bit more laterally and to think relationally that like he's
Mm.
literally modeling it again. Like, no, you can't just follow the map. You gotta step back and be like, oh, this thing goes there.
I never thought of that.
Me
That's
neither. I
so
just thought of
subtle.
it.
That's so subtle, but it's so true. And it shows that I think Hammond's a bit of a micromanager, obsessive micromanager
Yeah.
about, and not micromanager of like they are detail oriented. It's, I think about it in a sense that one thing might catch their eye, a little detail, and they are obsessive of it and they can't think of anything else and they steamroll everybody to get to that
Yeah.
specific thing.
I mean, he is a micromanager, right? We see
Yeah.
that in his relationship with Dennis Nedry. We see, right? He's like, he has a very he's really focused on details. He talks
Yeah.
all the time about details,
Right.
right? That's the recurring we spared no expense. It's this actor's voice. It's we've got it, the top of the line of everything. He's fixated on details. You get the sense that like he has insisted on being responsible
Yeah.
for choosing every when he says that he insists on being there for the birth of every dinosaur, right? It's like that you're a micromanager. You are for sure a
Yeah.
micromanager.
Yeah.
And it's like, at no point does he take that step back and think, like, what are the implications of what we're doing here?
Mm. It's so good. I love talking to people like you who we can just unearth more and more from this movie. I want to bring it back to your connection with Dr. Malcolm because in this book, there's a lot of the Malcolmism type of rhetoric that I feel I could hear Jeff Goldblum speaking as dialogue in a film. This is one of my favorites that you wrote. Maybe it isn't the chaos we need to fear. It's the violence of what we do to pretend we have everything under control. I mean,
Mm.
I can hear it. I can hear him saying that. Maybe it's the chaos we need to fear. It's the violence of what we need to do to pretend that we have everything under control. There it is.
Really good.
There's my
Really
Goldblum.
good.
That's my
Yeah.
Goldblum
Really
impression.
good
I
Goldblum.
will
I
stop
like it.
there. I will stop there. But I just want to say kudos because
Yeah, thank you.
I think this book reflects how good the movie is because you share some of yourself. You go deep into these really complex ideas, and then there's these just like nuggets of information and dialogue and thoughts that I think just like you just want to sit with, and it just reminds me of the movie, which is so cool. So I
Yay.
think it's a great companion. All right, we could talk for hours and hours. I'm gonna move on to some closing kind of. It's not rapid fire, but it's more of like quick fire questions. So
Yeah, short answer rather than
short
essay
answer.
questions. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is a moose the modern dinosaur? Do you think?
I mean, it's the last remaining species of North American megafauna.
Mm.
So like in some ways, no, an emu is the modern dinosaur. Come face to face with an emu and you will understand. Absolutely terrifying. But in other ways, in terms of like an encounter with something that is so big and seems to come from an ancient Earth, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I love that. That's in the book, friends. You have to read it to figure out the context of moose. Okay, this is gonna be tough. If you could only rewatch one scene from the movie, what's your go-to?
That's so hard. That's such a hard question. Um, I think that it would be uh the scene where they are going through the tour with the southern accented dino DNA.
Yes, yes.
And then they break out of it. Like they have
Yeah,
all these
like, how do
questions
we
and
get
then
out
they
of
get
here?
mad and they all break out of it. And like everybody's so upset. I think it would be that sequence. I mean, dino DNA. Like, I don't think I could go the rest of my life without hearing that
Yeah.
again. That's very important to me spiritually.
Yes.
But also I love that moment because they're all pushing against it, and then it's Dr. Malcolm who says on 3. Like he's the one who like organizes them, and it's the fact that the 3, it's such a little moment, but it's such a beautiful foreshadowing of the way that they are going to like work together to solve this nightmare scenario.
Yes. Is there a line from the movie that you go back to like that pops up randomly throughout the day, or that you say out loud to friends out of context?
Yeah, it's the title of the book, Clever Girl.
Clever girl.
It's when what's his name?
Muldoon.
The big game hunter. When Muldoon realizes that he has been flanked by the raptors and they're about to eat him, and he says, "Clever girl," and I'm like, I love that he praises them right before they kill him.
I did like that you talked about that. There's something there with it was the actor's choice, but he's either aroused, he's excited, he's like aroused and excited. He's like, what a way to go.
It's a trope of the big game hunter, right? Is that your relationship to these wild creatures is one of fear mixed with admiration, mixed with a secret erotic desire to ultimately be consumed by them.
That's good. I'm gonna, my partner and I, we watch a lot of like animal documentaries, and she's like, I don't know why anybody would want to go and actively try to kill this animal, and I'm gonna like tell that response to her. I think it will help clarify things. Okay, if you had an opportunity to own a piece of memorabilia from the movie, what would you choose? It could be anything. Oh, no limits.
It would be, I already own a reproduction of this, and the thing that I would absolutely want the original is the Velociraptor claw. I love that. I love that claw so much. It's so important. The fact that he uses it to threaten a child with disembowelment is so funny. I just love that Velociraptor claw. But like a close second would be the entirety of Dennis Nedry's rain outfit.
Yes.
I want that raincoat. I want the whole thing.
Oh, it's so good.
Icon.
It's style icon. Also, the pink, the uniforms of the park workers with the pink, like the bright pink polos, are pretty great too. I'm waiting for those to come back in the fashion scene. I'm waiting for like some Gen Z actor to start like wearing the Jurassic Park worker outfit. It's gonna come back. We're right for
Very
it.
Very specific.
Okay, this is gonna be interesting. What's your go-to installment besides the original? So what's one that you will watch if it's on TV or on an airplane? What's one that you go back to?
My second favorite is Jurassic World Dominion, and it's because it's where we get the conclusion of Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler's love story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
which sort of through the first trilogy, we find out that they ultimately broke up because despite his, important role in caring for these children, he doesn't actually want kids. And then they meet each other again, and her kids have grown up and she's gone through a divorce. And I just love that storyline so much.
It's so good. I could have used even more of that in that movie.
Fast forward through the Chris Pratt parts.
Yeah, it's just like I don't need Chris Pratt.
Yeah,
I don't. But need
Dr. Malcolm is now being on the payroll of it's InGen, right? InGen
it's Biosyn. I think it's Biosyn. Yeah,
yes.
Biosyn. I need to get a Biosyn mug. Yeah, I need to have both.
You need a Biosyn mug. Yeah, being on the Biosyn payroll and giving these talks where he's like, what you're doing is terrible. And everybody's like, yeah, great job. Sign my book. And back I go to keep doing it. And it's like, oh, what a bleak future for him. But then the fact that he becomes a sort of whistleblower from the inside. Like, I love getting to come back to these characters.
It's perfect. It's exactly what I would have wanted. It's like he's giving, the Google Talks or like a talk at Apple. And it's like, yeah, that's where you would be at this point. And then, he's a whistleblower from the inside. It was definitely one of my favorite parts of that movie. Okay,
So good.
speaking of the franchise, I have to ask, what are your thoughts on the news? We're getting a new movie next summer, Jurassic World Rebirth. How are you feeling?
You know what? I feel tentatively hopeful.
Mm,
And that is because the lead actors that they have cast are good actors.
right, right.
Particularly what's his face? You know, his
Yeah.
what's his face?
Yes.
From Bridgerton,
Mahershala
that guy?
Ali. Yeah. No.
No,
No.
no, no, no.
Oh.
I mean, Mahershala Ali for sure. Scarlett Johansson also an excellent actor, but I'm thinking of God, what's his
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
face?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
You know.
Yes. Lovers, not experts. That's what I say when we forget a name.
Yeah, everybody's screaming right now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
he is also a very good actor, and he uh is a paleontologist.
Mm-hmm.
So like they are going back to the idea of like this, it's interesting when we have doctors, and also it's interesting when we have good actors. So
Right.
like, yeah, tentatively hopeful that
Doctors,
we're
good
gonna get
actors.
something
Doctors, good actors.
smarter. Yeah.
Okay, I agree. I am cautiously optimistic. I believe that Scarlett
Jonathan
Johansson.
Bailey.
Yeah, Jonathan Bailey. There he is, coming through. John.
Ooh.
Yeah, Jonathan Bailey, Mahershala Ali, and Scarlett Johansson, who's really the big star, like bringing people into
Yeah.
the movie. She's done the Marvel thing, and I don't think you go back into a big franchise unless you have some confirmation on some things. So I'm hoping that
Yeah.
is a really good sign that she wouldn't join a project without it having a good foundation. But we'll see. They made it. They're making it really fast. That's my only concern.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's modern
But
movies.
like they probably made the first one pretty fast.
That's true. That's true. But that was Steven Spielberg, so yeah, in his prime.
Fine. I guess he's pretty good at making movies.
He's decent. He's decent. Okay. This book is amazing. I suggest if you're a Jurassic fan, if you want to think about this movie and more and how it can impact your life and conversations with people, you need to read it. But I want to ask you, as a writer, going through this process and thinking about this book and your childhood, what did you learn about yourself from writing this book and going through this exercise?
You know, I think that I learned a lot more about my relationship to stories of apocalypse. It's not something before I started writing this book that I'd really thought about. It is an apocalyptic story, right? It's a story of the world as we know it coming to an end and being replaced with something different. And as I started to sort of take that step back and think about its role in my own life, I thought, oh yeah, you know, there was a period in my life where I like really needed apocalyptic stories to help make sense of, you know, a major loss that I was living through. But then when I think about our sort of collective survival kits for the current moment that we're living in, it feels like another moment where we really need tools to help us navigate an apocalyptic experience that don't lead us towards giving up, that remind us that like massive, devastating change can happen and not everybody makes it through it, but there is something on the other side of it. And that stories can be a major part of our toolkit in navigating those really, really hard shared or personal apocalypses.
Absolutely. Life does find a way.
Life finds a way.
Life finds a way. That's it's a mantra I go back to, and I feel the same way. I going back through the movies, especially for this podcast, I was kind of going through. I mean, like a lot of us, it was kind of during the pandemic. I was thinking a lot about the environment and the earth, and it really actually helped give me clarity that like life will move forward. It might not be human life, but like life will find a way, and it's always good to have text and stories like this to help us through that. So thanks for sharing. That's beautiful. Okay, where can people find your work, the book, connect with you? How do people reach you?
Yeah. You want to find out more about the book or the general work that I do, including my podcasts, my website's the best place to go, hannahmcgregor.com. I make a podcast that does deep dives into pop culture. So if you enjoyed this level of granular scrutiny of Jurassic Park, check out Material Girls, which I co-host with my friend and long-term collaborator Marcel Cosman. That's, wherever you find podcasts. And then if you want a profoundly non-systematic series of outfit pictures and project promotion, you can follow me on Instagram at HKP McGregor.
Yes, that's what the people need. Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time to nerd out on this movie and sharing about your book and the backstory. It's been amazing.
Thank you.